What's going on, y'all? I'm Cam Best, and Second Dinner just released probably the most controversial changes that they have put into Marvel Snap since the beginning of the game. So let's take a look at what they actually changed and what decks I would be playing and what this means for the future of Marvel Snap. So let's get started. First up, I think this deck is still going to be the best deck in the game, the only stats deck with Lad. Obviously, if you don't have Lad, you can replace it with perhaps a Shang-Chi. You end up going a little bit more reactive as opposed to a little bit more proactive. That's fine. If you don't have Jeff, you can potentially replace it with Armor or Scorpion or any of the other 2-drops that are really good. Obviously, if you want to bring Miles back in, you do want to be playing Jeff. So generally, I think of it as a choice between Iron Lad and Jeff. You definitely don't need both. Now, the big headline news, though, does also involve this deck, and it is that Darkhawk will not be downgrading from Series 4 to Series 3 because they have introduced a piece of technology they are calling flexible series drops. Now, flexible series drops functionally mean Darkhawk and Null are not dropping, but several other cards that are less, quote, impactful are dropping. So generally, the reaction to this has been very, I would say, controversial. The thread discussing it in the official Second Dinner Discord has an equal number of upvotes and downvotes, which is pretty nuts. And there has been generally a ton of negative feedback about this flexible series drop. And I really just sort of wanted to dive into that before we dove into the specific card changes that are happening in this patch. Because yes, there are also card changes, but you can skip ahead in the video if you would like to see those specifically with no discussion of the flexible series drops, which are, I think, the main controversial issue within the patch. So what is happening effectively is that they are saying that we are going to leave some cards in Series 4 for an indefinite amount of time. Indefinite meaning, we can change it whenever. Not like the way big bads are indefinite is how I interpreted it, but indefinite meaning we're going to see how this goes. Now, specifically, I think that this is not as bad of an idea as it seems on its face, but needed to be communicated in a different way, and the communication failure led to a reaction that I think is maybe a bit more than warranted, but mostly warranted. In the context of what happened, basically what happened was people woke up, they saw the patch, and the patch said, you don't get Darkhawk today. And everyone was like, who was saving for Series 3 Darkhawk, everyone was holding their caches and all that. They're very disappointed by that. And I think that's sort of the issue that Second Dinner wants to address. They want you to be able to be happy spending your tokens. They want you to spend your tokens and not just constantly save and optimize and everything like that. And I think a lot of the changes in this patch are built to create that. But people want to get the best value for their money. That's just going to be how it is. And I think this change, keeping Darkhawk in Series 4, especially citing impact, is worrying to me. I have no issue with flexible series drops, meaning bad cards drop earlier. Fine. It's a little bit putting your thumb on the scale. It's a little bit tying power to price, but it's like the kind of tying power to price that gives everyone a discount, so it's fine, right? But when you get into keeping a card costing tokens for the explicit reason that it's really good, I think you have sort of crossed a boundary in terms of tying power to price. Now, I do think there is perhaps a good justification for this, and here it is. It is more accessible in Series 4 than it would be in Series 3. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm not convinced it's not true. In Series 3, you would have to cycle through everything. You get one free series card a month, and you have to get it. You have to actually pick it. Now, in that same time period, you get more than 3,000 tokens per month free. So in that sense, it is a little bit more accessible to have a card like Darkhawk in Series 4 in the context of, if you're willing to spend your tokens, which is kind of the issue, you will be able to acquire Darkhawk probably more early on the track than you would if you had, say, used your first free Series 5 on Sarah or whatever. You can now use your 3,000 tokens that you got for free just for playing the game over the course of a month on Darkhawk, yeah? I think that's kind of what they were going for, but what they ended up doing is, it sort of is that, but if they had announced this ahead of time and given people the ability to plan, I think that would have gone a lot better. because I think the number one thing that people are upset about here is that their plans were disrupted, their ability to play the game for relatively low cost was disrupted, and there may be more potential disruptions to that in the future with no real precedent set that these things are going to be communicated to them. So I think that's the major issue that I see. I think it is very, very plausible to me that this could end up being a good change, but I think the communication of it was lacking. And the specific implementation, i.e., keeping Darkhawk there, as opposed to just saying we'll be doing this in the future. Like, if they kept Modoc in permanent Series 4, is that bad? Are people really going to get mad about it? No, probably not. But keeping Darkhawk, and specifically, like, the key card for this deck, the best deck in the game, in Series 4, I think that is the kind of thing that might cause the friction that we're seeing right here. It does read like a potential just here, we're going to just slap another paywall on here. You thought you get to play this for free. You do not get to play this for free. And that's sort of how it has been perceived by the community, even if you want to argue. And I do think there is kind of a compelling argument, at least on some level, that a card in Series 4 is a little bit more accessible than a card in Series 3, given how many cards are in Series 3. But the fact that that's true is an issue in and of itself, right? The fact that that remains true is kind of a problem. So I definitely think that's something to look at. In terms of what it does to me, I don't know if it does anything to me except in terms of second order effects, which is to say, if people leave the game over this, obviously it negatively impacts me, right? I'm a content creator for a game. I want that game to survive. I want that game to thrive. So I think that even in the best case scenario here, this was communicated poorly. If that was their goal, if their goal was an attempt at getting people to look at Series 4 a little bit differently. Like, if they explicitly came out and said, hey, we want Series 4 to be where like all the super awesome build arounds go, and they're going to go into Series 4 now, and they're going to stay in Series 4 so that you can feel good about spending your tokens on them, I think that would be fine. But because there's so much nebulous question marks around this, because we don't know how long Darkhawk is going to be in Series 4, because we don't know how long Null is going to be in Series 4, or Modoc, or whatever, we don't have any access to the time frame. And I think that's a big issue, because one of the things that frustrates people the most about this is the sort of opaque time frames that was already kind of confusing to people in terms of like, okay, well, Iron Lad came out this month and Jeff came out last month, which means if I buy Iron Lad, I get a whole extra month before he downgrades where I have him and other people might not. So, like, you have to think about that when you buy stuff. And I think that kind of stuff is just frustrating and unnecessary. So, in terms of this change, I think, the thumbnail is going to say something like the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is the ugly. This is just not how it should have gone down, in my opinion. And I am deeply, I guess, frustrated with the implementation of this. So, one of the other things they did in the patch was they added the ability to purchase Series 3 cards at random. And I think that even more sort of pushes me in the direction of them thinking, okay, Series 4 is for targeted acquisitions of powerful cards, and then Series 3 is going to be random. And I think that's kind of where their head is at. And I think there's a way to implement that does not involve rug pulling Darkhawk out from everybody. I think that's that is like primarily the issue that I have with this, which is if you communicate this a month out and you make it clear that your goal is to say, we want people to feel good about spending tokens, so we're trying to give Series 4 a defined identity, and that identity is going to be these are where like competitive build around cards go. People would be like a little bit more receptive to that. But to drop it on the same day, one of those cards was expected to rotate too, even in the context of Null. I think that's kind of an issue. Now, let's move on to the actual card changes in this patch, because there are some interesting changes, and I'll also go over what decks I think I would like to start using these cards in. Obviously, a lot of my brain power has been absorbed in trying to figure out this whole card acquisition change, what it means for people, what it means for me. So obviously I've spent a lot of time on that, but I did also spend a little bit of time on the new cards. The first of the new cards is Kitty Pryde returning to the game, and she will also return to your hand at the beginning of each turn. Now, this Kitty Pryde gains +2 power every time she goes back to your hand. So, of course, if you play her with Beast, she will get the +2 power from Beast. Now, she will likely go in bounce lists. I also think there's definitely something to be said about her synergy with the Collector, and beyond that, it's important to consider that she might also be an excellent counter to Nebula. With Nebula being a card that benefits from your opponent not being able to play a card there, you can replay Kitty Pryde on your opponent's Nebula lane every single turn. Kitty Pryde gets bigger, Nebula stays small. I think that's probably her best case for being a really unique slot in a bunch of decks that would be playing Nebula. You can get a significant advantage in the mirror if you can fit her into your curve. Definitely worth seeing if you can do that. Now, however, I do think her optimal place is going to be something like a bounce list. You beast her, and suddenly she's a very powerful card at 0 energy. And you have all of this upside with her. Cards like the Collector, Angela, Bishop, especially if you're playing her for free. She is remarkable with those units. Now, there is something to be talked about when it comes to the balance changes and how bounce might be impacted, because one of the cards that got changed is one of bounce's major predators, Wave. Now, Wave has been a card that has been used asymmetrically for almost the entire time it has ever been out. It's been used with Death, it's been used with She-Hulk. The whole idea is that you get one of these cards that discounts stuff, you play the Wave, and then your opponent can only play one card, you can play 2 or 3. Now, Wave will no longer work like that. She is the final word on discounts now. Sarah doesn't go through her. Zabu doesn't go through her. Stature doesn't go through her. Miles doesn't go through her. Nothing goes through her anymore, including She-Hulk and Death. This makes her sort of a one-sided or, one-turn Sandman effect. Very interesting. I would look into playing this card in a priority-based list. This list wants to be ahead and be as ahead as possible before playing Wave and then probably playing Leader. So things like that, the old Leech Leader shell might be a good place to look and see if Wave slamming the door shut can still happen, just in a much more limited context than the Doom Wave and Death Wave lists. Next up is Crystal, and if anyone knows anything about me, they know that all the cards I play are purple. You see Crystal's green. It's a good thing they're looking at her. I don't know if this change is going to be enough to make her playable, but it is worth talking about how you can make an asymmetrical effect out of a symmetrical one. So one way to make Crystal better for you than for your opponent is play something like Mr. Negative. Another way to do it is basically just make your card draws worth more than theirs. So if you're playing some kind of combo deck, maybe it'll draw you closer to your Galactus that you want to play on turn 5 after an Electro. Like, the kind of things that make your draws more valuable are the kind of things she's going to want to be doing. I have been seeing people propose her in Darkhawk lists, but it's like that, or anti Darkhawk lists. Like, I don't really get it. But she's also good in the sense of, like, if you're a deck that needs card velocity, you need to play a bunch of cards. She can be good there, especially if your opponent is playing something clunky. Obviously, if your opponent is playing Electro, your cards are going to be a little bit more valuable than theirs, unless they're looking for something specific, like Galactus. So definitely something to look at with Crystal, but nothing that really stands out to me right now. Finally, Death being dropped from a 9/12 to an 8/12 is fine. I am interested in seeing where this goes. I don't think it's necessarily a bad change to make. I think it is, yeah, it's totally fine. I am interested though because, this is a card that actually could be pretty dangerous if it costs 7, and there'd be like some sort of Moon Girl, Deadpool, Death deck. Like, I don't know that that's necessarily out of the question now at 8. I do think you're generally going to be wanting to kill probably like 5 or so things before you want this to be a card you put in your deck. But if you are a deck that can reliably do that, I mean, we just saw Venom buffed. I'm not saying it's out of the question, honestly. Like, it's possible that the wave stuff was just something that we stapled onto Deadpool lists because it was, optimal at the time with how Wave and Death worked. It was just a bunch of free wins. But now, if we could focus totally on just turbo kills, I wonder if there's something there for a Death Deadpool list that just puts a bunch of stats on the board and maybe even includes some interactive cards. Who knows? I am interested in figuring out what that might look like. So I do wonder. I think it might probably be a little bit worse than, say, the Hitmonkey versions, the She-Hulk Hitmonkey Moon Girl combo. Kind of just like a side slash downgrade to that potentially, but it's definitely an area I'm interested in exploring. So the specifics of flexible series drops also do contain a few upsides. They're limited compared to the downsides of explicitly linking impact to price, I think, but we should still go through them. So cards dropping from Series 5 to Series 4, Master Mold, Negasonic, Teenage Warhead, and Nimrod. Cards staying in Series 4, the ones that were there, and also Darkhawk and Null. So the ones that were there being Shauna, Stature, Zabu, and Modoc. I almost get it. Like when you look at that list, you can almost see, oh, I get it. There's like, that's the 3,000 token build around here. Like you can see it sort of forming there with Zabu, Modoc, Darkhawk, Null. You get it, right? But I don't know if that's an ideal situation. Let me put it that way. Now, finally, dropping from Series 4 to Series 3 are Sentry, Silver Surfer, Dazzler, Shadow King, Sauron, and Ghost. So, that's good. Generally speaking, I would say dropping things earlier because they're not being played much, great idea. Holding on to things because they are being played a lot, bad idea. So half there, half not on this idea, in my opinion, from Second Din. So they also announced a couple changes to Series 3 card acquisition. This means that what they're going to do is add a mystery Series 3 card you can purchase with 1,000 tokens. Personally, I think this sort of reinforces what I was getting at earlier, where I think they envision Series 4 as where build around cards can go. And Series 3 is something that's a little bit more of a random collection experience. I don't know if I personally love that, but I do get the idea that, like, okay, you're actually more likely to see the Series 4 card you want than the Series 3 card you want, and we give you a bunch of free tokens. So maybe we can balance out the fact that it costs tokens with the fact that you are going to have it in your shop. I get it, but I think there still needs to be more work done in that context. So this free Series 3 card, it's cool. I'm into it. I guess it's not free Series 3 card. This 1,000 token Series 3 card is cool, but we still don't have the ability to target Series 3 cards outside of the random rolls for the free one that you get once a month. Now, they also said they're looking into more ways to earn tokens. They say over the last couple of months, we've been making adjustments to increase the rate players are able to acquire tokens. We think there are more improvements to be made here. In the next few patches, we'll be introducing a couple more features that will reward more tokens to more players. Our goal is that these new features, increasing the flow of tokens, player will be able to purchase more new cards more frequently. So, again, I think this is sort of with the idea like, well, okay, we'll increase your token flow. We'll leave the Series 4 cards there. They're always going to cost 3,000. They're going to be really good. And then the Series 5s are going to be for new releases that maybe they'll downgrade quickly, that kind of thing. I think that's what they were going for. I don't know if they hit the mark on that. Now, let's look at the first implementation of this. It's called Weekend Mission. Weekend missions are going to be special missions that you can access. Now, there is kind of going to be a little bit of a catch here. I know people have been getting mad about this one too, but I think this one's actually really interesting to talk about. So, weekend missions, they're going to be 3 new missions: win games to earn credits, win games with a season pass card to earn gold, win games with a newly released card to earn tokens. Basically, what they're doing is offering rebates effectively. So, now the actual price of the newly released card is not going to be 6,000 tokens. It's 6,000 tokens minus however many tokens you get from the weekend missions. That's your like little rebate or whatever. Maybe it's like 600, you get like a 10% rebate. That's pretty cool, right? Like that's not the worst thing they've ever done. It's effectively a way of lowering sticker price without lowering sticker price, and also sort of increasing engagement with your new cards. I get it. The same thing with the season pass, even though you have to buy the season pass in dollars. It's not a one-to-one the way tokens to tokens are. It is sort of effectively just a rebate on the season pass, extra value for season pass gamers, and finally you get free credits just for winning games. Generally speaking, I think the reaction to this is being colored by the reaction to the other changes. This is actually just pretty good. I know people are like, oh, it's FOMO, but it's like it's a rebate. Circuit City did rebates. What are we talking about here? Like, it's FOMO because the game is designed with FOMO. You get 1 week to buy the card and then you get your little rebate, but I get how it can feel bad for this to appear and for you to not have the card. I think, first of all, I think they should not have it appear if you don't have the card. I do not think they should give you a mission to get tokens if you don't own the prerequisites to complete that mission. I will say that for sure. So I really do hope that, like, a bunch of people aren't being taunted by the prospect of tokens in their shops, by like, oh, win games with Howard the Duck and you get like 600 to. I really hope that's not happening. So I will say I do think, there are some good things and some bad things in this patch. Not to get too, this patch is a land of contrasts. No, like I get why people are upset about this one. I do think there is a version of this kind of implementation where it makes sense, but I think not communicating it beforehand really handicapped them. I think especially doing it with Darkhawk on the day everyone expected it to downgrade really handicapped them. I think perhaps if they had announced this change with more intention, like, hey, if they'd said, hey, okay, look, in a month, we're going to be doing this. And the idea is that we want Series 4 to be where all the super dope build arounds go. And you can buy your favorite super dope build arounds because we're also making sure you get more tokens. I think that plays a lot better than just dropping it here and saying, ha, that Darkhawk you were planning on getting? No. So I generally think that I'm probably a little more optimistic on this patch than most people are, because I think a lot of people are very pessimistic on this patch. But I also totally understand why they would be pessimistic. And frankly, the fact that Second Dinner has shown willingness to tie cards' impact to their price is extremely worrying to me. I have always been a believer that, impact and price should not be the same. It's part of why I've been upset about the recent big bad design of High Evolutionary, where it's just like, oh, this is like a really, really, really good card, and they're going to make it be more expensive because it's really, really, really good. Obviously, I don't like that. I do think there's a little more nuance to it than that, in the sense that it is potentially true. I'd have to like really look at it, but I do think it is possible that the average Series 4 card is a little more accessible than the average Series 3 card because there are so many cards in Series 3. But the fact is, they're still putting a price on it. So accessibility might not be the best way to talk about it. Yeah, you can get Darkhawk potentially more easily than if you were in Series 3, but you still have to pay. That 3,000 tokens is still going to it as opposed to going to somewhere else. So I do think there's maybe a conversation there, but on the whole, I think specifically keeping Darkhawk in Series 4 is a mistake, and they should not have done it, and I hope that it is rectified. Otherwise, I don't think this changes a ton for me because I already own all these cards because they got me like, they got my ass. I'm got. But I do think they could have handled this better. Jokes aside, I think this could have been a win. And instead of being a win, it ends up being, I would say, like a very controversial patch. This patch could have been a big win, and instead it wasn't. And I feel like I say that. I feel like a lot of things that I say whenever they do a patch review is, oh, this could have been really good, and then it wasn't. And this is another one of those. So, as always, I'm KM Best. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one of them because I am a lunatic. So check me out. Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one.